Hello, it's Charlie Hall from Polygon, and I'm here today with a guest, Philippe Boulle from Relic Entertainment. How you doing, Phil?
I'm great. Really happy to be here talking to you and talking some Eldar.
Well, and we are, of course, talking about Dawn of War 3, the third iteration in the series that started way back in 2004. That's a long time. That's like 12, 13 years ago, Phil.
Yeah, it is. We've been making these games for a long time, and it's really, really fun to be able to deliver the third full installment to the fans out there. It's been a bit of a wait for people, and I think they'll find it's worth it.
Well, of course, the game was announced in May of 2016 with a fantastic CGI trailer. I could watch this 4-minute trailer like all day. I really enjoy it.
I have done so multiple times. It was a real joy to get out there, to produce, really find partners who really had the same appreciation for the IP and for that sort of portrayal of it that we've had. It was a real joy.
Well, I really think you guys nailed the tone of the universe, and it's a universe that I'm a big fan of and have been a big fan of for many years now. I'm a big Horus Heresy reader. I don't know if you're as big a Dan Abnett fan as I am,
Yeah.
but I love the stuff that he's doing there. But today, of course, we're here to talk about the Eldar, which is a new faction that you guys are really diving into for the first time here with us. But the Eldar are probably some of the more misunderstood, I feel, characters in the 40K universe. They're not just space elves, are they?
No, not at all. I mean, that is where their sort of aesthetic starts, but we really wanted to get away from the sense of them as, weaker than your average unit, basically. We wanted to bring in if you dig into the lore, they're really almost a warrior cult at this point. Like, all the Eldar, their civilization has fallen. They're sort of holding themselves together on these artificial planets called craft worlds, and all the warriors, they're called aspect warriors. They all sort of are dedicated to a particular warrior path, and we really wanted to get into the harder edges of them. The other aspect that's interesting with them is that because they're this ancient race and they live thousands of years, they once ruled the galaxy, essentially. They are, a font of wisdom, but also arrogance. And so playing with that balance with our characters was really interesting.
One of the things I noticed about the clip that you sent over here is that it's not an early mission. This is mission 6. So is this mission 6 in the game, or is this mission 6 in the Eldar storyline? How does this fit into the whole?
So the way our campaign works is you rotate sort of round robin style. So mission 1 is Space Marines, mission 2 is Orcs, mission 3 is Eldar, and then it goes back. So this is the 6th mission overall, and so the second mission you're playing is Eldar. And it's essentially the end of our first act. So it's the end of the sort of formal teaching period of the campaign. So it's really supposed to bring together all the lessons that you've learned by this point. So it's really a sort of a showcase for Eldar gameplay, especially in this first half of the mission that we're looking at now. It's really all about using stealth, scouting, figuring out how the Space Marines have set up their defenses, and then dealing with that in a sort of hit-and-run style, which is really the mantra that the Eldar are built around.
Well, if you've got this full screen and you're watching this at home, keep an eye on that lower right-hand portion of the map. That's where the mini map is. You're going to see that little trapezoid move around, and it's going to kind of show what Phil's talking about here. We're going to be moving to the left turn. We're going to be moving to the left flank. We're going to be moving to the right flank, and eventually there'll be a big push up the center. But I want to talk for a little bit about these ranger units that you start this mission with. Now, I've had some hands-on with the Space Marines at PAX Prime this year, but these ranger units are something different, and they're a big part of this mission. How do they function in the game?
So they're a stealth unit. So unless they attack or use an ability, they remain hidden from the enemy. So that really allows you to go out and scout, figure out where the enemy's forces are. There are some enemy units that will detect them, so they do have to be careful. But they really allow you to have some control over the space because you can get to see what's going on. We use a visibility system that you have a benefit if you're high up. You get to see down cliffs, but you can't see up cliffs. So positioning them correctly, you can get a really good view. The other thing with the Rangers is they're snipers. So if they do get into combat, they can actually do a fair amount of damage on their first shot. But then they have a really long cooldown before their next shot. So they're there for picking off one target and then moving back, or moving up supported by other forces.
So we saw the Rangers and some of the other Eldar units initially concealed in that tall grass, but now we see this outpost where the Space Marines are, and they're kind of taking cover in there. So tell me about cover and concealment in Dawn of War 3.
Cover to protect yourself from ranged fire works with very specific cover points. We haven't actually run into one yet. And they function more like buildings have in our previous RTSs. So you take control of it, it then protects you completely from ranged fire, and then melee units can go in and drive you out of it. The visibility, on the other hand, is a lot more organic in Dawn of War 3. So there's those tall grass patches that you pointed out where you can conceal almost any unit, and they'll block line of sight and so on. But then other objects on the field also block line of sight. And like I was saying, you know, if you're at the top of a cliff, you'll see down, but if you're in a valley, you won't see the top of the cliff unless people attack you from there. So there's a lot of opportunities to sneak around on this map. This part of the mission really plays to the strength of the Eldar, which is mobility and having a strong sense of where the enemy is on the battlefield.
Well, you mentioned that mobility, and the Space Marines do show off some of their own mobility later in this map, but tell me about where we're at. I'm seeing a lot of this classic 40K kind of crushed Gothic, dark Gothic architecture, but where does this mission take place?
So this takes place on a planet called Cyprus Ultima, which is the first planet we visit in Dawn of War 3. And, for the lore fans out there, it's actually a planet run by a faction called the Imperial Knights, so the House Varlock of the Imperial Knights. So the fortifications you're seeing are the the outer fortifications of their big keep, which is, an area that you fight over. And previously in the earlier missions, the Space Marines have come to their aid and sort of fortified the keep, and now you're trying to punch through those fortifications. So you'll see as we move around the map, there'll be wrecks from previous battles and, some bodies strewn about. The 41st millennium is not a a place for the squeamish, as it were.
Even the Emperor's finest gene seed, life is cheap for them, right?
Yeah, indeed.
So one of the things that kind of jumps out at you, if you've been studying up on the Space Marines, though, is how different the Eldar structures are. I'm seeing a lot of webways and portals. So tell me more about how the Eldar base mechanics work as compared to the Space Marine mechanics.
So probably the most important base building for them is actually a small structure called a webway gate. And we've seen one that was just north of their base, and it projects a large field, and when you're in that aura, Eldar moves significantly faster. It grants something we call fleet of foot. It also allows them to regenerate a health shield, so they have I was talking earlier about them being sort of a warrior cult. Well, they're warriors when they go into battle. They're sort of in a trance called battle focus, and that allows them to shrug off a bunch of damage. So in game terms, it means they have a replenishing health shield, and that's the pink bar on their decorators, whereas the blue bar below them is their actual health. And if they start losing actual health, they'll start losing troops, they'll start losing firepower. Here you can see the Space Marines fighting back somewhat, but they are a little outnumbered. But as I was saying, if they start losing troops, they'll lose firepower. So as long as they're within that area, they can replenish that shield fairly easily, and they can move much, much faster. So there's a really interesting gameplay of moving troops forward, planting those webway gates, and then as you tech up, you unlock the ability to warp the webway gates themselves, to open up portals in them so you can move your troops between different base buildings and between webway gates. It really makes for a different style of gameplay.
So now, of course, we've got one of the secondary hero units entering the map right here too. So we were playing at the beginning of the map with a Farseer. What's a Farseer, and who is this new person that just joined us?
So the Farseer we started with is Maka, and she's our protagonist. And Farseers are powerful psychers. So they have psychic abilities. She channels power through her spear. She can throw her spear and cause psychic explosions around them, or even freeze time, and place people in stasis. The second elite that we've just deployed is Jane Czar, and this is, for lore fans, this is a big deal. This is a character from the deep background of the Eldar. She's sort of a Eldar demi-goddess. She's one of the founders of this warrior cult I was talking about, and she's a character we've never done before in Dawn of War. From a gameplay perspective, she is just a blast to play. She's got this big throwing triskele, which is like this rotating blade that she can throw across the battlefield. It will cut infantry in half. It flies back to her. She can jump around. She's a really, really great unit against infantry. So again, this part of the mission really plays to her strengths.
And they're really impressive when they come down. I was able to bring down all three of the Space Marine hero units at PAX, but what controls for the player when you can bring these hero units into the game? How are they earned?
So it's time-based. There's a resource that we just call Elite Points, and you can see that down at the bottom left of the screen. There's a little purple diamond that has points, and you earn 1 point every minute or so, and different elites cost a different number of points. In late game missions or late campaign missions, when you have access to global abilities, you also spend those points to cast those big super abilities. So it's a pacing mechanic, and it's built around time.
Okay, so now we're working towards the left here, and there's a small group of Space Marines. But let's kind of fast forward just a little bit. Now
Sure.
take a look at kind of the main assault. So if you take a look at that little trapezoid on the left, we're moving up more towards the center of the map. We've got our Farseer. We've got the second elite, which is Jane Czar, you said?
Jane Czar, yeah.
Jane Czar, thank you, I apologize.
Oh, that's all good.
And so we are going after that first comm relay.
Yeah, so we've got a little strike force going here, and we're going to try and push in. Unfortunately, we get spotted here, so you can see the Space Marines are trying to raise an alarm. Jane Czar is going to try and take them out before they have a chance, but they just get that alarm off. So that means there's going to be some reinforcements coming in. So we got a bit of a tougher fight. You can see at the bottom of the screen there, that's the cover I was talking about. So the Space Marines have it right now. So they're being shielded from all that range fire. But when Jane Czar goes in as a melee unit, she can lay waste to those opponents and then take over that cover.
Okay, so then she can use that cover for her troops.
Exactly. So
okay.
you end up with a choice. Do I blast through the cover with my ranged guys and then just destroy the cover and then no one can use it? Or do I send in melee units to try and deal with it?
I love those little assault marines jumping in, and then Jane Czar deals with their friends there with her boomerang flying out and coming back. I love that. It is devastating to infantry. It's used over and over again during this mission to great effect.
It is one of the most fun abilities to use in this mission, just because you can do a lot of different things with it. I mean, it's, you know, one of the nice things about it is it returns and it tracks the unit. So as you keep moving around, you can sort of guide it into more targets. And it makes for a lot of fun. So we've taken out most of the defenders now, and Maka is going to capture that relay, and then we'll get some information. And then there's actually a secondary objective just north of here. That's that little green arrow that you can see on the minimap. And so we're going to start engaging with those guys to stop another flow of reinforcements.
Oh, is that secondary recon post out there?
Yeah, exactly. And you can see it was using some grenades. There's Maka's spear, and then I've got my Dark Reapers who are just laying down fire to wither that infantry.
Oh, and surprise, there's some Rangers up there that you didn't see as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So the Eldar units, like a lot of the Space Marine infantry units, they're smallish on the map at least. Tell me about the kind of the design that went into the unit identifiers there. Of course, they've got their life bars, but then there's this little iconography to the left of those as well.
Yeah, so those are all inspired from the lore, from the Games Workshop lore. They have a whole runic language for the Eldar. So we started there. In some cases, we needed to simplify a bit so that they would stand out when you're looking at them on the screen, because some of those runes can be quite complex. But it really gives us a chance to give each squad a bit more character to play with that setting information. You know, when it comes to unit identification, like one of our biggest concerns is always that you can find your hero units, because they're quite valuable. And especially with characters like Jane Czar, who are roughly the same size as the infantry units around them, we wanted to do some things like play up their animations, play up their effects. We have a little sort of ground circle that follows them around to help you find them. It's just part of making those units feel special. When we get to the third elite that we're going to bring in momentarily here, you'll see that there'll be no problem finding him on the field.
Now, of course, this Dawn of War 3 is known, I think, in the demos and the trailers that have been shown so far, for the scale of these elite units. Check this thing out. I love the size of your elites. So who is this that's just joined us?
This is the Wraith Lord. So this is a powerful melee walker. He, deals a hellacious amount of damage. And has another really fun charge ability that we'll get to see. I should say that there are even bigger super units. So because this is an early campaign mission, the super units aren't in it. But we also have the Wraith Knight, which is about twice the size of the Wraith Lord. So,
ooh, all right. Now I'm interested. See, I was a big player of Epic 40K. I don't know if you ever,
oh, yeah.
ever got into that.
Yeah,
but,
absolutely.
All the Titans stomping around. I don't know. It was a little easier for me to paint those than the little 28 mil figs. I don't know.
That is exactly why I got into it too, all those years ago. Just, paint your little guys one color, different colors for the shoulder pads, you're done.
Done, and you're out. Not that painting up Terminators ain't fun, but golly, it takes a while.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Who's this little Marine that runs out? Every time you come in touch with a little set of Marines, is that a Mechanicus that's running out?
Yeah,
first?
That's a Servitor. So that's the Space Marine builder unit. So in the mission, he serves two purposes. One is he will repair vehicles if they get damaged, but you aren't able to finish them off, so that you can see there's a dreadnought there. So if we had let him live, he would be trying to repair it. But the other thing is our builder units are our spotter units. So they are the units that can see those Rangers. So by having them patrol around, it's sort of a defensive technique so that I can't just walk Rangers into the middle of the base here. And
That's interesting.
and so that's a type of play that will manifest in multiplayer, and when you're playing other campaign missions, it's the type of thing you want to do too. So the enemy can't sneak stealth units into your base. So you can see here that Jane Czar, her health got down pretty low in that fight. So it's a good example. She's a fairly early game elite, so she's quite powerful offensively. We've seen her tri-skill take out squad after squad, but she doesn't have a lot of health herself. So as soon as there's a sustained fight, she needs to start pulling back. And in that way, she's very iconic for the Eldar as a whole, because the Eldar are really built around hit and run tactics. Once the health shield starts being depleted, or many of their weapons are burst fire weapons, so once they send out their salvo, they need to start thinking about pulling back, because a sustained fight is not going to go their way.
One of the big things that always crosses me up on RTSs, and Dawn of War games in particular, is assigning my units and grouping my units. What's the methodology or the preferred way to group my Eldar?
So generally, your best bet is to group like with like. At least that's the most approachable way to do it. So you can see here, I've ended up putting a bunch of Dark Reapers in one control group. Those are the little numbers that are showing up on their portraits at the bottom of the screen. And that allows me to just mass my forces as I want. There's obviously advanced techniques, like you can put units in multiple control groups. You can group different types of units so that you have one strike force that's going to the left and one that's going to the right. It's just a tool for the player to play around with. You absolutely don't need to do control groups if you don't want to, but it is a very handy trick.
Now, the Eldar have just actually moved their entire base structure about a third of the way up the map. Tell me some more about that feature of the Eldar.
So that's a unique feature of the Eldar, is they can warp their base buildings. That allows them to move that fleet of foot radius I was talking about forward. And base buildings also have smaller auras that will heal elites and allow line units to reinforce. So it's a good idea to move the base forward, since we're about to push into the stronghold itself. I mentioned that the early part of the mission really plays to the Eldar strengths of hit and run. This part of the mission plays to the Space Marines' strength. They're well entrenched. They have, a layered defense set up. So it's going to be trickier for the Eldar player at this point. They've built up a larger force, but there's a lot of hard targets here. So you can see we're scouting with the Rangers, but they got revealed by a servitor, so they have to pull back. And we're going to try and get in, but the Space Marines' agenda is always going to be to bog me down into a sustained fight, because they will outlast Eldar in a sustained fight.
Now, of course, the primary objective of this mission is to draw out Gabriel Angelos, who is the Primarch, I believe, of the Blood Ravens, right?
He is their chapter master.
Chapter master of the Blood Ravens.
Yeah.
So what are they fighting over, though? Like, what's the story? What's going on here? Why are these guys beating heads against each other?
So there's this Eldar prophecy that a mysterious planet is going to appear near Cyprus, and on it is a powerful weapon called the Spear of Cain. So the Eldar are getting ready to go onto this planet, and the Space Marines have arrived in response to that as well. So they're fighting it out, trying to be in the best position to get to that planet. Maka, our Farseer, has actually been assigned to hunt down Gabriel, and that's what this mission is about. Knocking out their commander. For those who've been following Dawn of War since the beginning, Maka and Gabriel are both characters from the original Dawn of War, and so they have a history And in that game, they were sort of allies, at least for a while, but they didn't part on the best of terms, and this is them. This is their next meeting, really.
So, of course, in that initial trailer that dropped last year, the orcs also showed up as well. So how do the orcs figure into this storyline?
So the orcs are present as well, definitely. They're on Cyprus. Whenever there's a big fight, you can tell the orcs are going to show up there. And the orc chieftain, Gorgut's another character from the original Dawn of War, or at least from its expansions. He has a whole plan set up, and I don't want to ruin that for anyone. Spoilers!
So the Wraith Lord is in there tearing things up right now. I was really surprised to see the Wraith Lord just out at the tip of the spear on his own without very much support behind him.
Yeah, that is true. Now, he's among Eldar units, he is one of the toughest. But the Space Marines are deploying the right counters for him. You can see those las cannons targeting him. Those are anti-armor weapons, and they will start cutting through him. So his shield is gone now. His health is starting to go down. There's heavy bolter fire hitting him. Now, that heavy bolter fire isn't doing a lot of damage to him, but it is slowing him down. So he's having a hard time getting away. So you can see like his health is down to a sliver at this point. Now I'm bringing in guys to support him, but not in time. I just lost both of those elites that went in on their own. And and this is part of what I was saying, where the Space Marines are really trying to bog me down. They're throwing stun grenades. They're just keeping me in a fight longer than I should. But it's another illustration of the sort of balance that we do between the elites and the line units. Oh boy, there's some artillery coming down. I better move my guys.
Is that what that marker is? Okay,
yeah.
Okay.
I was able to get them away, but that would have wiped them.
So what are these flying units here? I saw you building them earlier.
Yeah.
This is kind of the first that we're seeing them get into the fight.
Yeah, so these are the Eldar anti-armor units. They're called Shadow Spectres. So they're a sort of higher tier unit. They have sustained fire prism rifles that are essentially laser guns that will cut through armor. What's really unique about them is they're actually flying units. So they're infantry, but they can hover over gaps. They can, they can't be tied down in melee. I've got a nice mass of them. So if I can sustain fire on an armored target with that, I'm going to do a lot of damage. But again,
you just saw the Space Marine drop pods coming.
Yeah,
That's some
exactly.
of the mobility that I was talking about that the Space Marines have. They push you back. You're trying to kind of recoup some of your life bars, and here come these Assault Marines in drop pods.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the Space Marine tactic, is they can build some units in reserve, hold them back, and then when they sense some weakness, they can bring in an extra punch. And like you say, I was trying to recover, and they went in and poked me. Now, I had enough forces that I could push them back, but if that artillery had taken me out and I only had a few forces left, those two squads that came in could have finished me off.
Now, tell me some more about this Eldar armor piece here. I've seen a lot of the 40K models under glass, these beautiful gravitic tanks that they've got, but I've never actually seen them fielded on the table. How do they fight here in Dawn of War 3?
So all Eldar vehicles are flyers or skimmers, so they can go across the map. They don't have to worry about gaps or walls. They can fly over them, so they're highly maneuverable, but they also aren't as tough as Space Marine tanks. So you can see my Falcon, which is the tank there, has taken a lot of damage, but this time I was able to hit and run with them. I was able to go in, I took a bunch of damage, but able to pull them out, and now I have my Bone Singers repairing it, and I'll be ready to go again. This tank in particular is also a transport, so I could put a squad into it if I want to, and I can also reinforce squads around it. So it gives me some extra mobility for the rest of the army as well.
When you say reinforced squads around it, you can actually bring them into the battle on the tank as a spawn point?
Well, what it means is I can load in a squad into the tank and then drop them off somewhere else. But then if I have other squads that have taken losses, if they go near the tank, they can replenish those losses. So
okay.
Yeah, so they don't have to fall back all the way to their base buildings to do that.
So we've got the Wraith Lord over there on the left, just kind of taking it easy. But then we've got some of the Space Marine armor. Now, what is this Space Marine armor piece here? It looks like a Land Raider?
No, that's a Predator tank.
Okay.
Now that's the Predator Destructor, which is the anti-infantry setup. So it's not the best counter to the Wraith Lord. So he's going to do some damage. But you can definitely see that the Eldar are still the Space Marines are still entrenched up there with las cannons, heavy fire, heavy bolters. So it's still a tough nut to crack for the Eldar here. But I'm able to take out that tank, and then let's see if I can punch into that cover. Now I'm being a little more cautious than I was last time, pulling my elites back. Maka is there to provide support, throwing her spear around, which does damage, but also can buff allies. So
And that
quite
cover
helpful.
went down as well.
Yeah, so that they were able to punch through that cover. It took enough damage that it broke down. So now my guys aren't protected there, so I have to do something about that.
There's these very large circles that are forming on the map. Tell me more about what that's representing.
So those are range indicators for abilities. So I have some Dire Avengers who have a grenade ability, and it's when I activate it, it shows the range ring for the ability, just so I know if I target it out of that, then my unit will have to move before they throw.
So a nasty trick gets played on you here the next 5 or 10 seconds. Here you are trying to kind of recoup your unit's strength around one of these webway gates. You've got a few forces that you're trying to rebuild and move back up to the front, and then bang, zoom, smash right
Pretty
from orbit.
serious, but I have the right counters there. You know, Jane Czar can throw her Triskill. My forces are well arranged, so I'm able to cut them down pretty fast. And that shows actually the risk reward of the drop pods if you're playing Space Marines. Is, you know, it can be really intimidating to drop these troops into the midst of your enemy. You also do some damage and knockback when you do, but that also means you have troops that are unloading right in the guns of the enemy. So you know, you find there's some situations where it's great to drop right behind the enemy lines, and there's times when you want to drop it in a more supported position.
So we're about to kind of embark on the final assault here. Tell me more about the scope and the scale, though, of the overall campaign. This is mission 6. How many more missions have we gotten, and where is the story going?
There's 17 missions total. So you, and like I said, you sort of rotate through the factions, and that allows you to see things from different perspectives. For the player actually knows more than any one of the protagonists, which allows us to do some interesting narrative tricks where we show you different things from different perspectives, and you get to set up things from one mission to the next. So, you know, in fact, I was mentioning that Maka is under orders to find and kill Gabriel. Well, she's actually doing that in direct response to something that happens in Mission 4, where the Space Marines sort of mess with the Eldar. So, you know, and in the meantime, they also interact with the orcs. So it really creates a nice build-up of a broad conflict without making one faction the heroes.
And we're going to see here in a little while another one of the Space Marines' elite units, and that is, I believe his name is Jonah?
Yes, this is their chief librarian, And for those who aren't into the lore, librarian may not sound like the most intimidating thing in the world, but for the Space Marines, a librarian is someone with very powerful psychic powers. So he's going to come out and try and deal with these pesky Eldar. And here he comes, and he's a Space Marine elite, so he's got a wide variety of abilities, and he's going to make pretty good use of them here. Now I've got a pretty large Eldar force, so it's not an easy fight for him, but he does have more drop pods coming in, more reinforcements. So
it looks like another Predator tank, too.
Yeah.
My goodness.
Yeah, absolutely. Some Maka's fallen here. Now here comes Jonah, and boom, he uses...
So what is this?
So this is one of his abilities here. He creates a psychic wall that traps people. So unless you have jump, you can't get in there. So he then actually used another ability which blinded all the opponents in there. So you can see that none of the Eldar who were in there with him survived. And it also did a really good job of keeping the Wraith Lord at bay. Now here comes Janzar. So the elites, when they get killed, he's using another offensive ability there. They sort of go on cooldown, and then you can bring them back after a few minutes, essentially. So that's why I've been able to bring these elites back a few times at this point. So he's putting up a good fight, but Janzar does have that tri-skill, but you can see she's taken a lot of damage. Now here goes the Wraith Lord, and you may not have picked up on that, but that charge he does where he drags his sword, you can actually trigger it early, so he'll do another swing in the middle of the charge, and I was able to...
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was able to knock back Jonah at that point and sort of tie him up so he can't use his abilities as well. But still taking some heavy losses here. There goes my Wraith Lord again.
Those Devastator squads are brutal.
Yeah, that's one of those things is, you mass a few line units, and if they have the right counters in place, they can deal with elites pretty well. Elites really, benefit from micro and, reward that type of play, but they're not I win buttons. Okay, so we've done a bunch of damage to Jonah now, and I think we finally caught Gabriel's attention. And so...
And ending the mission, he comes out to face his fate and have a parlay with Maka.
Indeed.
I'm very excited to see where this goes. Do you have a schedule, plans, things that you're hoping to reveal sometime soon?
Oh, well, we have lots of plans, but nothing I'm ready to talk about right now. I'm just super excited to be showing off the Eldar at this point. One of the big strengths, or one of the big goals for us for Dawn of War 3 was to make sure it wasn't just a Space Marine game. So really being able to talk to the Eldar, talk about their story, and then later on the orcs, that's just really exciting for me.
Well, it's fantastic. It's coming. The information I've got sometime in 2017. Do you have any more definitive window than that?
Well, it's definitely between January and December.
I'll take your word for it. Thank you so much for spending the time with me today, Phil, and I'm looking forward to more information down the road.
It was a pleasure, Charlie. Thank you.
Human blood this